So, welcome everyone to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and it is Tribute Week, or at least it's the day of tributes. We're going to be looking at some interesting tribute cards today. There was a new article out discussing the tribute mechanic, which, if you don't recall, is a mechanic that is a summon effect that happens anytime that a unit goes into the void. So that's either from your hand or from in play. If it's one of your units and it goes into the void, then when you summon a unit, you will get a special tribute, which gets you some sort of cool bonus. So there have been 4 new cards spoiled, and we also have our very own exclusive spoiler, which we'll be showing at the end of this video. So we're going to be talking about each of these cards in turn, what kind of things go on with the tribute mechanic, and what's kind of interesting about the mechanic as a whole. And tribute is largely a really cool mechanic. It really encourages you to create basically interesting attacking and blocking situations. Oftentimes suicidal attacks will seem a lot scarier now, because if you have good tribute effects at particular times, then you have to be very, very careful that your opponent doesn't that you don't block a card that you wouldn't otherwise want to block. For example, we're going to be talking about some cool stuff at 4 in time very shortly, and we've got right now a common or an uncommon tribute card called Iron Fist Faithful, which is designed to create interesting tribute situations specifically in draft. So Iron Fist Faithful is a 1/1 flying tribute +1/+1 that allows you to basically get yourself a 2/2 flyer for 1 in Justice. If you're trading in an Argenport stranger or any number of other interesting strangers for your opponent's 2/2s on the attack here, if you're trying to just basically create a clear board, then playing this unit down after your next 2-drop is a really good tempo play in draft games, and that's something that's fairly important to note. Iron Fist Faithful is also one of the few 1-cost Valkyries in the game, and if you're playing Valkyrie ally synergies or any sort of stuff that actually revolves around having good Valkyries, this card is actually reasonably strong for those high synergy games. This is a really, really good Valkyrie card for any deck that wants to do all of the things that Valkyrie decks want to do. Previously, your options at 1 to 2 included things like Stalwart Silverwing, which doesn't have enough stats, the 1/2 that gives you 2 armor, which gives you some interesting weapon support, but also doesn't really have enough stats. Iron Fist Faithful is a card that pretty naturally, in a limited environment, is going to come out as a 2/2 flyer for 1, giving you the ability to just have a Valkyrie for whatever it is that you want to run out, Signal Flags, the Inquisitor's Blade, if you want to do anything that has that Valkyrie synergy, if you want to play the Watchwing as a 3/2 as opposed to as a 2/1, then yeah, this is a card that actually really does a pretty decent amount for you. I don't think that it's got enough strength to really run in a ranked environment, just because a 1/1 stat line for 1 is just not very good. Valkyrie... The one that turns into a 5/5, Valkyrie Aspirant, is not good enough for ranked, and I wouldn't say Iron Fist Faithful is going to be any better, seeing as, while it does sometimes come out as a slightly bigger unit, it's just not aggressive enough. So maybe in an aggressive Valkyrie deck you could see it, but I think an aggressive Valkyrie deck is probably going to be playing too many flyers for that to be conceivably possible. That being said, Iron Fist Faithful is clearly just a solid draft card. It makes the draft environment pretty interesting. It actually makes you think twice about whether or not you want to trade with your 2/2s, and there's going to be some more action on the field as a result of cards with tribute in general. So this is just sort of a really basic, uncommon level example of what kind of situations are gonna arise when you're playing with tribute, especially in the draft environment. And we want good draft cards; those are important to have. So that's good things, and this is gonna maybe increase the fun of Valkyrie decks in that setup. So pretty cool stuff. Now, the tribute cards have a cycle of 2-drops that we have now seen 2 of. There was Living Sacrifice, the 2/2 that for 1 sacrificed to silence a unit, and now we have Magenta Wisp, a 2/2 that for 1 sacrifices to kill an enemy unit with 3 strength or less. So this is a clear tribute enabler, and that's actually something that we want to really focus on, because good tribute enablers are going to make all of the tribute cards better. We really want to find cards that have tribute mechanics where they can sacrifice themselves or figure out some way to kill themselves themselves in a really, really easy fashion, because that way we can trigger tributes on our own time and on our own cues. That's actually going to be really important for tournament setups where you generally will have players playing around your tributes constantly because they can see your deck lists. And it's going to be important for any sort of tier 1 deck list where basically everyone knows what's in the list and they really have to, they know that there's a good tribute card at a particular time. They're not going to allow you to play that card. Cards like Magenta Wisp enable you to actually do some good things with tribute and basically like create your own patterns that are actually really beneficial to you in terms of what you're looking for. So yeah, this card is pretty solid for that kind of thing. It's a Suffocate on a stick. It's a little bit unusual because it is as a 2/2 bear, like not all that like 2/2 bear is, not great stats for an Eternal card. It's still good enough. And this card can weirdly enough often trade with most of the units that it wants to kill when it pays 1. But overall, like having a 2/2 that you can just put on the field, pling your opponent with, and then occasionally use to kill something important on their side of the field is pretty good. This card is also really nice because it's an aggro-ish purple card that does cool tribute tricks, and it also kills some very important cards like Seraph and Huru Pacifier, which can mess up your strategies and mess up your aggro curve quite a bit. So yeah, this is definitely a cycle, and I think we're going to see one card in each color that does this particular mechanic. So going to be pretty cool. Alright, so Magenta Wisp is actually released as part of a set, and we can actually see another Wisp card here, Soulbringer, who is our first Radiant Wisp, actually our second Radiant Wisp tribal card going on. This is the first time that we've ever seen Wisps mentioned, but we do have a card called, I can't remember the name of the card, but there's a Wisp that actually decreases the cost of Radiance, which makes it easier to play Soulbringers in the first place. And Soulbringer plays Wisps from your Void and also allows you to, as a tribute, play 2 Wisps from your Void instead. That's actually really, really strong with the Wisp that I am thinking of, which is a 2-cost. I'm gonna just go ahead and look it up because it's actually kind of important to talk about this card in the context of Soulbringer. And yeah, this card is basically Wisp, hybrid, purple, yellow, Mitotic Wisp. Flying, your Radiance costs 1 less. When 7 other units go to the Void, draw a Radiant of your choice. So yeah, if you are playing Mitotic Wisp with this card, then it doesn't usually cheapen Soulbringer, but Soulbringer can frequently bring it back, making the rest of your Radiance significantly better, and also allowing you to stack up Mitotic Wisp's trigger and get the card advantage out of it that you really, really want. So I definitely see Mitotic Wisp being played with Soulbringer. This card also plays well with Dark Wisp, the card that draws whenever it's sacrificed, and the Wisp that we have just had revealed, which is just kind of like ridiculously good stuff on a stick. Like if you play all of those together, you can do things like pay 1, kill something, play Soulbringer, play back your 2/2, and also get a Mitotic Wisp, and like, yeah, no, there's some insane nut strategies there. This can bring back Friendly Wisp or Ephemeral Wisp. You don't really want to bring back Ephemeral Wisp because that comes back anyways, but you can get some pretty good stuff out of this, and if you're doing like Dark Return shenanigans to grab Friendly Wisp, I don't think that works the way that you want it to, but you can still get some really interesting Xenon Killer setups going where you're drawing cards multiple times off of your Friendly Wisps or doing some cool sacrifice tricks. This card enables just a really interesting pattern of cycles that I think should be good enough to see a decent amount of play. It's a solid rare. It's a lot of fun in draft, which is really important. Like as a limited card, I think it's actually pretty bomb. You want those Wisps, but overall, like it's definitely doing enough work there that it could really make some good stuff happen. And yeah, there is a 2/1 Deadly Wisp at common called the Nightfall 2/1 Wisp for 2. That one's also quite solid for Soulbringer, Nocturnal Creeper. So yeah, Soulbringer is solid on all counts. Not like a huge, ridiculous role player, but definitely going to see play in basically everything under the sun. And yeah, could be really interesting in a lot of different decks. I'm curious to see if there's a tier 1 deck involving it. It might be a little too many different moving parts, but overall, like, this is definitely a wild amount of stuff. Okay, so Time has a new 4-drop, which is our primary tribute mechanic of the article, although not our primary tribute card of the day. We're going to be looking at Nash Pridemaster here. So this is a 4-cost double Time, which means you have to compete with Sandstorm type in that slot. And hey, here's a card that does. So 4 cost, tribute +3/+3 immediately means that you have a 4 cost 7/7 in time if you can trade in another unit. And there are 2 extremely good ones that you can trade in with Nash Pridemaster. Both Reliquary Raider and Dawnwalker work extremely well with Nash, especially since if Dawnwalker dies for any reason, then you can play Nash and get the Dawnwalker back. I'm actually not 100% sure of that. I have to check whether or not Tribute triggers as a setup. But like, nonetheless, like Dawnwalker is probably a card you're going to be attacking in with pretty frequently. It's more likely to at least activate the trigger on Nash, and getting the Tribute on Nash is basically the thing that you want here. Like, if you get that 7/7 for 4, you're pretty happy with what Nash is doing. That being said, let's talk about what happens if Nash doesn't get that tribute. Well, Nash still has the ability, when Nash attacks, discard the top card of your deck, and if it was a unit, your other units are invulnerable to damage this turn. So, organizing your deck such that you have a unit on top of your deck is pretty important. And there is a card that currently does this. There's a 4-drop warp card which says, hey, I am a unit, would you like to discard? Hey, I can... Oh, never mind. I'm being crazy. Resurface actually only gets spells. Anyways, so scratch that thought, but if you want to use Second Sight and Excavate and other shenanigans to get these kinds of things going, then that's definitely a possibility, and you can indeed excavate things like Dawnwalker or Ephemeral Wisp from your Void just to guarantee that you have an invulnerability spell, which turns out to be pretty good in any sort of Elysian Rush deck where you're just trying to play lots and lots of big units. So yeah, seems very, very solid. I would say like this card has just all sorts of shenanigans possible. The tribute alone is worth it, but the other 2 things that are really interesting about it are not only is its effect very good, like that invulnerability to damage can be devastating in the right type of deck, and it's also very good with Sandstorm Titans, it's good with Carnosaurs, it's good with any number of other interesting options. But the other thing that's cool about it is that it enables, for free, other tributes. Because if you are attacking and you discard a unit, you can trigger tributes on your next card, which may be another Nash, or maybe any number of other cool things. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and I'm getting like some sweet sunlight rays for dramatic effect, which is pretty cool for the next thing that we're gonna be covering, but I'm still gonna go ahead and close this thing. So we'll be just 1 second here. There we go. Lighting! Okay. So, now that the dramatic sunlight is gone, we get to talk about our tribute card, which, as we may know from like I was posting pictures of oranges previously, 8 oranges in fact, because the card Cloudsnake Hatchling, let's go ahead and grab Cloudsnake Hatchling real quick here, has a pair of oranges in it. Someone finally guessed it, and I'm very glad that that they did, because that was something that I wanted to show off. So our card is a blue card with tribute, and it revolves pretty heavily around Cloudsnake Hatchling. So that 1/2 flyer for 1 that is just not quite good enough, but is really, really fun in any sort of like ridiculous flyer deck. We've seen like a lot of interesting flying related strategies in blue, but they've never really quite been able to get there. We haven't seen a lot of good Huru Flyers decks, or really any type of Flyers decks in blue for quite some time, despite blue having a significant advantage in the air and the ability to create very, very wide boards. But some of the card advantage isn't quite there. There's just not quite the right type of stuff for it. And on that note, I think we can go into our card, which is Aeva, Eilyn's Elite. Now, Aeva, Eilyn's Elite is a 5-cost 4/5 for double blue that has both a Tribute and an Infiltrate, which both of which create and draw 2 1/2 Cloudsnakes with flying. So this card is a 5-cost 4/5 flyer, which is solid limited stats. Really, really solid. Very, very good overall. But it also pretty frequently creates a good trade that gets you 2 units that you're pretty happy to have, or 2 cards that you're pretty happy to discard to other effects or do other crazy things with. And the Infiltrate if you can get Aeva across, gets you even more card advantage. Aeva represents potentially 4 extra cards, which you can then use with cards like Herald Song or Whispering Wind, or my personal favorite for Cloudsnake hatchlings, the Hatchery Hunter, which turns your cards into even more bigger flyers. Delightful, delightful times. If you want to turn these cards into other things with Unstable Forms or Shimmer Packs or other stuff like that, you're definitely going to be wanting to do lots of weird things with Cloudsnakes, and Cloudsnakes definitely enable those opportunities in a very, very solid option. Someone's calling this card Snakes on a Plane, and I love it. That's perfect. So Aeva represents like overall a 4/5 for 5, or even better, like a 6/9 in stats for 7. Like you can get up to 8/11 in stats for 9, or so like there's a lot to be sort of put out here. Like it's basically just putting a ton of stuff on the board with flying that makes ridiculous things happen. And if you're in any way buffing your flyers through cards like Windshaper, Xenon Obelisk, if you're using your like standard like Barbarian Camp in Limited, if you have any way to make those flyers nastier, then the Cloudsnakes become really, really brutal, really, really fast. But the main thing about her is that she's a very, very cheap, relatively efficient flyer that happens to be just in the mid-range bomb potential for Limited, and her 2 abilities are both extremely strong and pretty reliable. Ava's fairly likely to get her tribute. She's just the right cost to get a tribute at the time that she most wants to, and she's a card that people are really going to have to pay attention to prevent like that kind of shenanigans from happening. Like this card is just kind of outright ridiculous in draft because you're attacking in with 5 power up in blue, and your opponent has to really wonder if they should block and trigger any like sort of spark effects or anything like that, or not block and trigger those spark effects, or take a trade and then possibly run into Aeva getting her first tribute followed by her second tribute. She's a serpent trainer that has really, really grown up into legendary status. She's kind of outright crazy on that front, and yeah, she's beyond anything else a limited bomb. But I think this card overall in ranked actually has the stuff to make it across. That stat line's very good, like it is just in the area of being good enough for a flyer at 5. It doesn't trade terribly well with cards like Impending Doom and a lot of the shadow cards that can get you some like 5/5s in the air, but the majority of flyers don't really deal well with Aeva, and this is above things like Valkyrie Enforcer and Unseen Commando and all of the ridiculous Huru options, except for Shelterwing Rider. She doesn't trade with everything, but she does a really decent amount, and it's not too hard to give her a +1/+1 and get her to the point where she can evenly trade, or rather do better at trading, with any type of card that you can imagine that's going to be a threat to you, namely Doom, Shelterwing Rider, and the occasional flying nonsense machine from Argentport. Like, she's very, very solid in terms of what she's doing at 5. The Create and Draw 2 ability is actually pretty strong for a wide variety of effects. You are certainly likely to be playing cards like Whispering Wind in these types of flying decks, and just being able to discard those cards is really useful, but also like those cards are just extremely good with the same kind of buffs that you want to use on Aeva. This makes Windshaper a significantly more playable card, and this card was already, buffed to give this blue flyer setup a much better like field in the first place. So it's really nice to be seeing a blue card in this setup, so you can do some cool stuff with it. Another one that people are mentioning is Crown of Possibilities. Aeva is a card that draws 2 cards, so if you're playing with Crown, you can certainly get some potentially deadly Cloudsnakes, you can get some lifesteal ones, you can get some killers and charges and all sorts of stupid shenanigans there. Like, there's a lot to be done with Crown here. There's also a lot to be done with Vault of the Praxis. Elysian Aeva has like maybe 2 or it's got several different decks that you could potentially play with. Overall, I love this card's potential for ridiculous shenanigans, but she is just a solid block of stats, and a lot of times that's all you're gonna need. You're just gonna want her to be like your sort of big aggressive unit at the top of your flyer curve that just makes a lot more dudes and make sure that you never run out of the flying blockers that you need to make sure that you're alive. Aeva also, like, those Cloudsnakes can be used as defenders. They can be used as further tributes for any other tribute effects that you want to run. If you want to make copies of Aeva with your new special End of Hostilities, Aeva can basically run in with a Cloudsnake or two, lose a Cloudsnake, End of Hostilities off the top of your deck, make 2 copies of Aeva, draw 8 Cloudsnakes? Draw 4 Cloudsnakes, and then still have the Infiltrates to play with later on. So, like, she is an absolutely bananas card to echo and do all sorts of copy effects with. She's probably pretty fun to play around with other types of effects. Like, she's got really a lot going on. And I think that there's just so many different uses for those Cloudsnakes that it's potentially, like, really, really solid just to play her. And if you're playing, of course, Wild Cloudsnakes decks, the ones that want you to play a lot of flyers, that's pretty awesome. You can play with, like, Cloudsnake Breeder and figure out if there's any sort of exceptional Cloudsnake buff that you can run. You can roll Cloudsnake saddles and put them on the Cloudsnakes just for the sake of having Cloudsnakes with saddles on them. Like, yeah, there's a lot going on. This Cloudsnake is already saddled up. Like, this is a fully saddled Cloudsnake. It's a 4/5, like it's supposed to be. Ugh. So Aeva's outright bananas. Like, this card is very, very strong overall. Like, I think she's just a very good role player rare. She isn't, like, the most outright ridiculous thing that we've seen, but she's power in Primal, and I'm always glad to see power in Primal, and this is a good space for power in Primal. It's something that we haven't seen enough of in this particular set, and it's something that's going to be really, really fun for the draft environment, give them a lot of cool tools against, in particular, Argenport Flyers, which is something that we've seen quite a lot of lately, and, you know, like, definitely it's cool to have other ways to smack people in the air, and to have other colors that can both defend in the air and make it, like, a little less likely that those flying decks are going to be quite as good. So yeah, this is going to be a really, really cool mechanic, and, like, I think this is one of the strongest examples of what kind of things you can do with the tribute mechanic that I can think of. Aeva is also, like, because she's an infiltrate card, infiltrate cards in general just make great tribute cards because they're really, really awesome at basically forcing your opponent to block them. Cards like Gorgon Fanatic also, like, allow you to tribute in ways that you would not otherwise be able to do. So if you're playing Haunting Scream with cards like Aeva's Eilyn's Elite, Aeva herself does not Haunting Scream, thank goodness, but nonetheless, you can use Gorgon Fanatic to draw 3 cards, slap down an Aeva, and then suddenly have infinity cards in your hand. It's good stuff. So yeah, this is a rare to be excited about in draft. I think that's my favorite thing about it overall, but it's also a decently powerful role player in cool flyer decks, a decently powerful role player in cool card advantage decks that want to do interesting discard shenanigans, and both of those are decks that I would expect to see some tier 2 to tier 1 decks with, maybe arising out of cards like Aeva. So yeah, I'm delighted and excited. That is it for the spoiler breakdown for today, folks. Like, I am real excited about Tribute as a mechanic. It seems to encourage amazing gameplay. There's so many cool decisions to be made about what kind of things are happening on the board. Like, this is a mechanic that benefits both the player who is playing it because Tribute is rewarding and fun, but also the player who is playing against it because Tribute makes for interesting, difficult, and tactical decisions, which are one of the hallmarks of good Eternal, and something that Eternal definitely always is happy to generate more of. Like, I'm really glad to see these cards. Tribute has proven to be a really, really cool mechanic, and I'm excited to show off Aeva and all of these tribute cards for you. So, to the YouTube folks, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe. We got some deck techs coming up over the next couple of days, and I'm hoping to make up some Eternal basics to run over the upcoming 4th of July week, during which I will be gone from Twitch. Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. So I will see you guys next time, hopefully with more spoilers, but also with more cool decks and other things, and have a really good night to you all.